Welcome back to the second part of News and Views. As I was saying earlier, we have Perez with us from Perez Legal Group based in Marbella, and she's here to talk to us about renting, short-term, long-term, rights of owners, rights of tenants, all sorts of things that go along with that. Good afternoon, Raquel.
Good afternoon, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
Good, and I know you're busy as well.
Yes.
Renting does pose, if people don't really go about it in the right way, either the tenants or the landlords, it can pose quite a lot of problems, can't it?
Yes.
For instance, rental tax here in Spain, I mean, how does that work?
Well, I think that many landlords, they are not aware that they are subject to the Spanish income tax in the rental tax, about the rental tax declaration. And they must declare it. They have to declare it. Tenants also must be aware that landlords are obliged to declare in their declaration all the details of the landlords. And about the identification number, about the name, even they have to provide details of the rental contract. So landlords must be warned that tenants who declare in Spain their taxes, they have to declare and reveal all the details of the landlords.
Right, yes. Yeah, quite rightly, yes.
Yeah, and also there are some reductions which have been very beneficial for landlords and tenants, about the taxman reducing 50% of the rental tax for residents and non-residents who are European Union citizens, and they have applied 50% reduction in their rental tax declaration as part of the Spanish income tax.
Right. So that's useful to know as well, yeah.
Yes. Yes, which is beneficial.
Yeah, very, very beneficial. And that's, of course, included in new law 1995 as well. Yeah.
Yes, the new law of 1995 was very necessary because landlords with sitting tenants from the previous law of 1985 had many problems to evict them or not renewing new contracts. Actually, the contracts of 1985, under the law of 1985, they were sitting in there with no end. Actually, they couldn't even raise the rental to all these tenants.
Right.
So the 1995 law, the Urban-related law of 1995, has been beneficial for landlords and tenants. Landlords were able to renew contracts and update contracts with regards to terms and conditions and raise the rents up to the markets as of today. So it was, it was just a way of stop the abusive situation from the tenants to stay there for years and years with no end, and with landlords not having the possibility to raise the rental payments.
Yeah.
And also the new letting law allowed to distinguish different type of contracts. That was the short-term contracts, we call residential contracts, the long-term contracts, which was quite a difference in there, which people are very confused about it, whether the differences are.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah,
because you've got your long-term and your short-term contracts with different rights, haven't you?
Yes, you've got, there are a lot of misunderstanding and confusion with regards to what we call contrato de temporada, or short-term contracts. Actually, the new law of 1995, which is the one that we apply now to rental contracts, is not applied to short-term contracts. The short-term contracts, the tenant hasn't got the right to stay in the property. The contract, the terms of the contract, the time limit of the contract is limited to the period stated in the contract. That's a short, we call contract a short-term contract.
Right.
Now, the big difference is this is just limited, as I said, as a short-term contract, as the time the period that is stated in the contract. Now, when we're talking about a residential contract or a long-term contract, the tenant has the right to stay in the property up to 5 years.
Right.
And that means that if the landlord does not agree to renew it, if the tenant wants to stay, he has the right to stay up to 5 years. The landlord must be aware that they have to notify the tenant well at the beginning, at the beginning of the last year, if he decides not to renew it, well in advance, in order that after the 5 years the tenant does not stay. Every year the landlord will have the right to claim from the tenant an upgrade of the rental according to an inflation corrector factor, which will be published by the tax agency. Then after that 5 years, if the landlord decides to renew the long-term contract for another year, the tenant will have then to go with the conditions of the landlord, because then the landlord will have the right to choose how much rental will be, but after the 5 years.
Yeah, okay, so different rights, like you say.
It's different rights and it's complicated. Many people, as I said before, get very confused about long-term contract, short-term contract. We call contrato de temporada a long-term contract, which is the same as a residential contract, contrato de vivienda. And they must get legal advice. Some people, because obviously in Costa del Sol it's very common practice to get rental contracts, in internet or find out about agency in internet, but they must be aware that it's a lawyer who should check the terms of the contract, about what they're getting into and what implications they're getting into about when the time arrives of renting a property here.
And it at the end of the day, it covers you as well as a tenant or as a landlord.
Exactly, it covers both parties. It has to cover both parties. So every party has to have a lawyer. Okay. And the third thing is there are a very common contract legally named called 11 months contract, which actually it doesn't make any difference with the long-term contract.
That's what I thought.
11 months contract is exactly the same as a long-term contract, and actually the tenant has the same rights as a long-term contract. Actually, the tenant can declare, if he is residing in Spain, can declare that this property that he's renting is his residential home. So even if the 11-month contract expires, if he goes to court and declares that this is his residence in Spain, he is declaring his taxes in Spain, and he wants to stay, normally the court will oblige the landlord to renew the contract.
Right.
And oblige the landlord to renew the contract up to 5 years. So the 11 months contract will become really automatically a long-term contract with the rights for the tenant to stay up to 5 years. And people are very confused about that. They don't know.
Yes, they are, because a lot of people confuse the 11th one as a short-term one.
No, it's not.
No.
It can be considered. I mean, the 11 months contract is finished after 11 months.
Yes.
But if the tenant decides to get a lawyer, first of all, and have the information and exercise his legal rights on the property, and he is resident and declaring his this property that he's renting as his residential home, then the court will dictate that he can stay up to 5 years. So that contract will be automatically turned into a long-term contract up to 5 years, just with the update of the inflation correction factor of updating the rental every year.
Okay.
But
good to know.
It will not be a short-term contract.
And you hear all sorts about deposits taken as well. It can be anything from 1 month to 3 months, and I have seen advertised sometimes people asking for 6 months deposit. How can they do that, or is that sort of like entirely up to the landlord and the tenant? How much the landlord wants to take in deposit and how much the tenant decides that they should pay as well?
Well, the agreement always is a private agreement between the tenant and the landlord. I will always advise to my client that if he has a long-term contract, to get at least 1 month deposit, at least.
Yeah.
Normally, I would say in premises, I would say 2 months. Now, as I said, the agreement is very private. Nowadays, because there are so many eviction cases happening, landlords are more aware about what is going on, as the process can take up to 6 months or 1 year or 1.5 years.
Yes.
Actually, there is no time frame because it will depend very much on the court and the procedure. So I would always say that it's a private agreement. The minimum or the normal process will be 1 month for long-term contracts and 2 months for short-term contracts. And then premises, I will say always 2 months.
Yeah, okay. And I suppose what's in everybody's mind is how you act legally if you want to evict a tenant as well.
Yeah, well, from the point of view of landlords, I think they're quite lost of what to do. But again, I would say the first thing they need to do is just act immediately. And if the tenant is failing just 1 month of paying the rental, just to get your lawyer to send him a notification, which can be a notarized letter, or can be a burofax, which is actually the previous step to start legal procedures against the tenant. Okay. Now, that will be the first step, to send a letter saying you called this time to proceed and pay the rent, and otherwise we will have to take legal proceedings. When that is the case, normally there's no any other way but to go to court. Because if the tenant has already failed, I mean, the probability is that he will just continue to pay the rent. It will be, you know, very, very few. If the tenant is not replying to that notification, then obviously you have to take the tenant to court and start an eviction process. The eviction process, an eviction case is divided into different processes at the same time. The first one will be to evict your tenant because it's not paying, and that process can take minimum 6 months up to 1 year, depends on how quick the court is. In the meantime, you've got a sitting tenant there, not paying the rent.
And you're losing money.
And you're losing your money. Yeah. That's the procedure. That's the way it is. Obviously, you are keeping your deposit as part of the rent that the tenant is not paying. So the first case will be to evict the tenant, which is one case. And second case is to claim the tenant the rent amount he hasn't paid. So it's 2 different procedures.
Right.
The first procedure will involve an attorney, which is normally 300-400 euros, separate to legal fees, which can vary from 1,000 euros to 2,000 euros. Depends on how much is the rent as well, and how complicated is the case. The most important thing, how you are more protected, the most important thing is that always to get a lawyer involved since the beginning and get a proper contract in which, you know, the clauses of the contract are protecting yourself. Now, there is 2 cases. There are 2 hearings normally in an eviction case. The first hearing will be for the judge to dictate a verdict over the procedure, which is normally, obviously, that the tenant has to evict the property. Yeah. And then the second hearing will be an agent, normally a police, will go to an official person designed by the judge from the court to evict physically the tenant from the property if he is still sitting in there.
Right. Okay.
So that will be the procedure.
Okay then. Okay, that's the procedure. And if perhaps you're thinking of letting agencies doing the work for you, I suppose thinking of how they work and how you can protect yourselves with them as well.
Yeah, well, you have to protect yourself from everyone, actually, because, you know, it's
just
the rental world is a world that comes and goes, you know, very quickly. And obviously, the most important thing is you protect yourself with a good contract. From there, it's very difficult to protect yourself any further, because obviously, if you don't know your tenant, it's very difficult always to rent your property to tenants that you know. You can't do it to friends, but sometimes even friends, when you get money involved, you get, you know, disputes and got problems.
Yes.
So you never know. Actually, the main thing is you get your lawyer to prepare a proper contract defending your interests either you are the tenant or the landlord.
Or the landlord, yeah.
The letting agencies, obviously there are many in Costa del Sol. There are good ones, bad ones, like everything. I would say that I would advise people just to get a reputable and a good estate agents to get involved. Be careful with the authorizations you sign as well on behalf of the estate agency to like get deposits and sign contracts on your behalf, sign agreements or deposits on your behalf. Normally, the letting agency will act as an office to have a deposit until the landlord and the tenant get an agreement together.
Yes, yeah.
And the lawyer is preparing the contract in the meantime. They could, but they have to be aware that they have to be careful as well.
Okay.
As everything.
Thank you very much, Raquel. Thank you.
Welcome.
And of course, as we've been speaking, your website has come up on the screen, so people, if they've got any queries, they can contact you.
Yes.
And we do have a sort of a regular slot with you every other month to talk about legal things, and you're going to be doing some things for the municipality.
Yes,
and
there will be some seminars,
which
in
we'll look
September.
forward to.
Yes.
We'll talk about that nearer the time.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Raquel.
Thanks to you for having me here
Thank you.
today. Thank you.
And time now for some highlights of the Atabache Flamenco group, who perform on Wednesdays at 12 o'clock, and it's free of charge, care of the tourism department of the Mijas Town Hall. 12 noon they usually perform, and you'll be able to enjoy that with your relatives and your friends. So don't forget as well to tune in tomorrow, Una Sierra Mijas Digital, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Hasta mañana.